Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel. I'm so delighted you've joined me this evening, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. How are you doing? I'm doing great, thank you very much, and I'm so excited you're listening tonight to a fabulous story. And before we get started, you know the rules. Go and get yourself that fabulous sparkling effervescent drink or something lovely and warm and cozy and comforting to drink, because I've got a lovely story for you tonight. But before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell and the thumbs up, and let's get started with tonight's story. Dear Sarah and all your lovely listeners, it was an indelible, imperishable day, as it was one that she was unlikely to ever forget, for this was not your run-of-the-mill standard funeral. This was saying a permanent farewell to her very best friend Debbie Greentree. For some people, she knew the memory of this day would float away like a feather on the wind, soon to be forgotten. And so would Debbie Greentree's precious memory. As tragic as that may sound, that was life for you. Things moved forward on the roller coaster of time, where the present speedily overtook the past, and the past is left behind, taking a back seat in your mind, so your focus becomes on the current moment. She knew there would be a day when the locals in town would not remember Debbie, like you don't recall what you ate on your birthday 3 years ago. Suffice to say, with the passing of time, much is forgotten. So much is lost. Memories are erased. But what is important, what is significant, stays with you forever. It permanently sticks to the enduring, ineffaceable postcards of your mind. It can never fade because of the resolutely stubborn, unfading impression that it made on your life at the time. In Jackie's case, Debbie Greentree's memory was like that. Debbie had been like a cherished sister to her, the sister she never had and had always wanted. Her closest, most beloved friend, whom had been so cruelly taken from her life far too young, when she had her whole life ahead of her. She thought that Debbie would be a part of her life forever, but it was not to be. It was so surreal that something like this could have happened to her, something so unexpected, so out of the blue. Jackie had never thought that death was something that was a threat to her generation. Let's just say until now, her life had been peppered with a veil of invincibility, as in her young, naive eyes, ignorant of many sobering truths, she had falsely assumed that death was an exclusive club for senior, mature members only to join, rather like a bridge club or a bowling group. Younger people weren't members of this exclusive club. But how wrong Jackie had been about that. Death is no respecter of age or persons. Some are taken from the world long before their time, far too young. Debbie Greentree was a member of that exclusive club, as fate had firmly decided that she would be exiting this planet sooner rather than later, and in Jackie's mind that was grossly unfair. She reflects on the hours before Debbie had met her fortuitous end, and shudders to think that she too might have ended up in the very same watery grave with her friend. By all accounts, the hands of fate had serendipitously stepped in and put a spanner in the works that had overturned their plans in a way that neither of the girls had anticipated or expected. It would seem that she and Debbie were planning to go to a party together that night. Indeed, they'd been looking forward to it forever and a day, as this party was exceedingly special. It was to celebrate the 25th birthday of Victoria Lewis Gray, who had been to school with the girls, and whose affluent father had pockets so deep that he owned yachts and aeroplanes and houses in exotic sunny locations around the globe. The very extravagant event was being hosted at an upmarket venue outside Portland that people had been talking about for weeks on end. It was the kind of spectacular birthday celebration that you didn't want to turn down under any circumstances, as no expense had been spared. It was rumoured and speculated that there would be marvellously magnificent carved statues made out of ice, and delicious food on offer produced by an award-winning chef dripping with illustrious international awards. The party entertainment was Las Vegas style in every regard, with not-to-be-missed comedians, dance shows and fireworks displays. So this was a celebration one would be foolish to turn down. And there was going to be music and dancing, and an acclaimed DJ who knew how to turn every party into a dazzling success. It was not the kind of party you would want to miss. Jackie had lost her desire to go to this party, when only a couple of hours before the event, She'd found out from a well-meaning good friend of hers that her boyfriend, Nick Rothberger, had cheated on her with Leticia Baker. Jackie knew Leticia would be in attendance at that party, probably acting nonchalant, as if nothing had happened. Jackie couldn't stomach the idea of going to that party now. She was consumed with the devastating hurt of her boyfriend's treachery. When you feel that deflated and down in the dumps, even the brightest sunset on the horizon will not attract your attention, let alone a party that had appeared so promising from the beginning, but now had lost its appeal. She would not be going to that party. She was sure about that. Everybody knew about Leticia Baker. She had a notorious reputation as the boyfriend scavenger, who seemed to have this incredible ability to bulldoze relationships with an astounding efficiency, so that the relationship she willfully vandalized with her artful seduction would come crumbling down like the walls of a dilapidated building. Many believed that Leticia did this on purpose, almost like satisfying an annoying itch she was desperate to scratch. She clearly loved causing devastation wherever she went. It was as if she wanted to prove that relationships that seemed so steadfastly secure were anything but. Nothing was as secure and solid as you thought it was, as even a bank vault had its weak link. It was as if Leticia had the secret combination number of the lock or the skeleton keys to break into relationships at random, destroying everything in her wake, so that you were left with the scant remains or beleaguered grey ashes of what you believed was once so very good. A little like an infestation of moths that has eaten away at your best woolen sweater. Leticia came from a broken home. Some believed that her insatiable attraction towards men, that were not otherwise available, was her cunning way of getting back at her father, who had abandoned her when she was a young girl. Somehow wrecking relationships for her was some kind of divine justice, or payback if you like, that brought her a huge measure of personal satisfaction. "See," she would say, gloating proudly, "those two were together for 7 years, and you thought it was rock solid, did you? But I had that man eating out of my hands." "Why would you do something so mean?" her girlfriends would ask her. "Please," she would say, "I've done so-and-so a favour." Now she knows her man wasn't as committed as she thought he was. For Jackie, this startling revelation that her boyfriend she'd been dating for the last 5 years, whom she thought was decidedly faithful, had cheated on her with Leticia. It was like caustic acid burning in her guts. She had felt so numb, so betrayed. Her churning stomach was in a tangle of knots. Suffice to say, all morning she'd been throwing up the contents of her stomach. She was not sure why she reacted like this, but the vomiting seemed to purge out her embittered feelings. She didn't know who she hated more, her boyfriend for cheating on her, or Leticia for seducing him so easily. It was not as if the men in town did not know what Leticia was like. Everybody did. She was the explosive firecracker you daren't light up on the 4th of July, as you might just blow off your hand in the process. She was the dangerous firecracker which came with a red warning sign that said, "Light this at your own risk, highly combustible, exceedingly dangerous." "What on earth is wrong with you, Jackie?" her mother had said, looking at her concerned. "You're green at the gills. Did you eat something that didn't agree with you?" she asks her daughter, putting a cool hand on her forehead. "You seem so hot and sweaty," she said, looking alarmed. "You look as if you're coming down with a fever of some kind. I think you should have a good lie down. Forget the party that you and Debbie were planning to attend tonight. I know you've been so looking forward to it for ages, but I can assure you that if you're feeling rotten, you're not going to want to go. And if you do go, you'll regret it. Believe me, I know about these things." "I'll be all right, Mum," says Jackie, "but I think I have eaten something a bit odd. I shan't go to that party. I'm not up to it." "Good girl. That's a wise decision. You look dreadfully peaky, if you don't mind my saying so. I am rather worried you're coming down with something. You don't look at all good. If I were you, I'd go straight up to bed." When Jackie's boyfriend Nick had phoned her that morning, he had apologised profusely for what had happened, as word on the wind had told him that Jackie had found out about his duplicity, and so he was obsequiously trying to persuade her that their night of passion had meant absolutely nothing, and that for some incongruous, unfathomable reason, he was not responsible for his actions, as Leticia Baker had deliberately enticed him into her arms, so it was all her fault, of course. "I don't know what to say,"
I feel very, very ashamed. I don't even know how it happened. But you know it's you I love. You know what Leticia's like. She came on strong.
And that's your pathetic excuse, is it? You know what Leticia's like. But like a lamb to the slaughter, you allowed her to seduce you. You have no willpower, no self-restraint. You couldn't resist her allure, despite the fact you knew it would destroy us. If you love someone, it should be easy to say no to a woman who's throwing herself at you. You couldn't say no to her, could you? That speaks volumes. It shows me that our relationship has not been built on strong foundations. Maybe Leticia did me a favour. She exposed how pathetically insipid, shallow and insincere you really are. But perhaps I knew it all along anyway, deep inside me. But I didn't want to admit it to myself. Leticia just exposed it.
Don't be like that, Jackie. It meant nothing, it really did. It was a dreadful mistake. Why won't you believe me? It was a once-off. It'll never, ever happen again. I promise you that. That woman, you have no idea, Jackie. She's like a snake in the grass. She coils herself around your neck like a boa constrictor, squeezes the life out of you. That girl's not right in the head. She's got big issues. I mean serious mental issues. I think she's a misogynist. I'm sure of it. And my bet is it goes back to the anger she had towards her father. And she still has, I imagine. I think she's deliberately setting traps for men, waiting for them to bite the bait. I'm pretty sure she's a narcissist as well.
You knew all that already, so don't start making excuses to me, Nick. You knew exactly what you were doing. You knew what Leticia was like, and yet you were so beguiled, you couldn't say no. So stop making excuses. You're right, Leticia is a misogynist, possibly a narcissist too. But you still allowed yourself to be ensnared in the fibres of her silken web, didn't you? You've seen how she's massacred other relationships in the past, but you still became embroiled with her. Your brains are in your pants, Nick, and you deserve everything you get.
You don't know what she's like. When she comes on to you, Jackie, you really have no idea. She is quite the temptress, and it's difficult to say no to her.
That's no excuse. I'm not going to sit here and dignify you with a response by listening to you making up some pathetic excuse like this. You cheated on me, Nick. It's over between us. It's simple. When the trust is gone, there's no point in pursuing a relationship. If I did, I would have very little self-respect.
Please, please don't be like this. We need to talk.
Before Nick could say anything else, Jackie had thrown the phone back on the hook, while a long trail of hot tears began to trickle down her cheeks, so the mascara on her eyelashes dragged down her face in black streams, while she choked back the tears, her tongue tasting the saltiness and the ghastly taste of the bitter bile rising up in the back of her throat. "I'm not coming to the party tonight," she told Debbie Greentree, who was borrowing her grandfather's car to take them there. "I'm sorry, I just can't. I feel rotten." "You're kidding," came her best friend's startled voice. "We've been planning this for ages. What's wrong with you? Are you sick or something? We discussed our clothes we would be wearing at length. Don't you remember? You were going to wear that gorgeous floating aquamarine dress you bought. And now you don't want to come? That's insane. I thought you and Nick would be eager to come to the party. My grandfather has agreed to look after Daisy for me. Everything's been fastidiously planned." "I know, and I'm so dreadfully sorry, really I am. I'm not sick. Nick cheated on me." There was a stiff silence on the other end of the phone, and then one word. "Leticia!" "That's right, Leticia." "You've got to be bloody kidding me! Your Nick cheated on you with Leticia! What the hell is wrong with him? He needs a brain transplant. When will the men in this town learn that Leticia is like a stone fish? You touch her and you're pretty much dead. Nick and you were so solid. Why would he do this to you?" He claimed she was a temptress and he couldn't resist her seductive allure. "Tell me something I don't know. I'm a victim of that woman's wrath, remember? A broken relationship to show for it, and a 10-year-old daughter to boot. I had to raise myself because her father conveniently disappeared off the face of the earth and can't be traced. Is there any man that is capable of not being speared by that woman's poison? I don't even know why they're so easily seduced by her.
I mean, she's not even that attractive, but she obliterates everything she touches with remarkable efficiency. I've never known anybody like her. I can't believe that Nick fell for her spell."
Jackie reflects about Debbie's comments for a moment, as a picture of Leticia floats into her mind, reminding herself that she's viewing Leticia from a woman's perspective, not from the eyes of a man, who would perceive her quite differently. This she does know. Let's just say in her eyes, Leticia is nothing special. She looks like the girl next door. Not that there's anything wrong with looking like the girl next door. Brown hair that cascades over her shoulders, eyes the colour of warm chocolate, a voluptuous figure. No, she's pretty ordinary, not even terribly pretty. But Jackie has seen the way Leticia flirts, how she seductively arches her brows, how she looks at the oblivious victim of her seduction with coquettishly doughy eyes, making them feel as if they're the only person in the world that matters. She may not have beauty on her side, but she's magnetic, mysterious, alluring and exciting. That's why men can't resist her. And for a brief moment in time, she makes a man feel as if he's all that. Who wouldn't enjoy feeling like that? Everyone wants to feel wanted, needed and adored. But Leticia had cracked the whip in the art of seduction, and had whittled it down to a fine, masterful craft. She was a real witch, that was for sure. "No, she's not pretty, I agree," says Jackie, "but she's very, very—" "Charming? Yes, she can be charming, alluring. She's going to be at the party tonight and—" "You don't need to explain, Jackie. I get it. I've been there, remember. I've eaten the same soggy cake, so I absolutely know how you feel. But don't you think in the circumstances, knowing what Leticia is like, you should give Nick another chance? I mean, the woman, she's a witch. She literally casts spells and puts magic love potions into men's drinking glasses. I promise you, I'm not joking. I wouldn't be surprised if she actually really does it." "Absolutely not. I'm not going to forgive Nick for this. He knew what she was like. He pulled out the firework from the box with a danger sign attached to it, but he still lit it. He knew its potential dangers and ramifications. And that tells me everything I need to know, Debbie. I was clearly not enough for him." "That's a great analogy, Jackie. But I do wish you'd come here tonight to the party. That way you could show Leticia and Nick that what they did to you is water off a duck's back and that you don't actually care a jot. You're missing out on the greatest party in the world because of the two of them. Are they really worth it? You have to ask yourself that." "I know what you're saying, and I understand where you're coming from, Debbie. But I can't come to the party. You know you're my best friend, and I would do almost anything for you. But this I can't do, even though we've been planning this for absolute ages. What we would wear and so forth, but I just can't do it. I can't sit back at that party, watching Leticia's smug, self-satisfied, triumphant expression on her face, as she looks at me with that, 'I got your man, and he couldn't resist me' kind of look on her face, while Nick spends the whole evening obsequiously begging me to take him back. I need that like a hole in my head, and Nick can be very persuasive when he wants to be, and I'm not going back to him, not after his betrayal. I'm not. I get it, but I'm so going to miss your company tonight. I really am. And the party, it was going to be so exciting. I mean, we don't get to go to parties like this. This is a really grandiose occasion. I was so looking forward to the two of us driving to the party together in my grandfather's car and having a good old chinwag. I'll have to drive alone now," she says sorrowfully, her voice failing to conceal its bitter disappointment. Jackie feels bad for her friend, of course she does, and disappointed herself that the party she was eager to attend has now gone up in smoke. But wild horses would not persuade her to change her mind and go to that party. She was going to stay the hell away, as it would help her to keep her self-esteem intact, which was hanging on to her heart by a fine silvery thread. Little did Jackie realise that this was the last conversation she would ever have with her best friend Debbie Greentree. She remembers the following morning with a crystal clear clarity, after a long, miserable, insufferable night, spent in bed bawling her eyes out and soaking her pillowcase with her tears of regret. She had always believed Nick was the man she would spend the rest of her life with, so her wistful hopes had been shredded like an old newspaper into hundreds of pieces. It was a Saturday morning, and a beautiful day at that,
when Jackie very reluctantly rose out of bed. There was a crack in the curtain of her bedroom window, and a warm sunshine filtered through the bedroom. Its bright shafts danced ebulliently over her duvet cover. It was the warm nudges of the spring sunshine that kissed her face affectionately that made Jackie actually get up. She had intended to barricade herself in the bedroom all day, basking in her lugubrious melancholia, but her plans had suddenly shifted. She'd be damned if Leticia Baker and that tow-rag of a boyfriend of hers would have the privilege of destroying the rest of her weekend. She ambled over to the curtains and drew them back, and stared out vacantly onto the backyard, where she could observe her father standing behind the lawnmower, mowing the green grass. The mower was making that pleasingly comforting humming sound. She noticed her father's expression was very fixed and preoccupied, as he studiously focused on the job at hand, in a meditational stance. She wondered if he liked mowing the grass. He certainly did a fabulous job. The sky was so blue this morning, with white candy cotton clouds. Some of the trees were covered in pearly jewels of fragrant pink blossom. It was such a perfect spring day. The sun was not reticent in magnanimously spraying its sunny showers of warmth over absolutely everything, so that the whole landscape twinkled. Yet the coldness in her heart prevailed, and could not be extinguished. Jackie wondered how the outside world could be so beautiful, when inside her heart was the direct antithesis of this beauty. For her heart was like an ice-cold, desolate alleyway that you'd never want to walk down. Her mouth tasted bitter, as if she'd forgotten to brush her teeth the previous night. So she popped into the bathroom and brushed her teeth rigorously, to rid herself of that horrible stale taste. She glanced at her grey reflection, staring vacantly into the mirror, at the dark circles around her eyes. Goodness, I look dreadful, she thinks. I look more like a ghost than a human being. She quickly threw on a pair of faded jeans and a sweater and ambled down the sweeping staircase towards the kitchen, her heart still heavily afflicted with its current woes, that like a weather report seemed to have a turbulent prognosis for the week ahead, with little hope of any sunny specks. The house seemed steeped in a subdued silence, as if it too was commiserating with her flagging spirits. Jackie dubiously entered the kitchen. She saw her mother sitting at the kitchen table, her face dipped into the pages of the newspaper, while she was drinking a cup of coffee. She looked up at her daughter with a look of concern, dappling her earnest face. "Should you be up, dear? I'm really worried about you. How are you feeling? You look quite dreadful last night. Me and your father are very concerned. I'm wondering if we should call a doctor." "Oh, don't worry about me, Mum." Jackie hadn't wanted to indulge her parents with the shenanigans of her embittered love life. There were some things you didn't share with your parents, and the personal affairs of her heart were for her eyes and ears only. "I'm feeling better," she lied, but nothing could have been further from the truth. "Everything's all right with you and Nick?" asked her mother suddenly. "I was wondering if maybe you were, having issues, perhaps." "Everything's absolutely fine, Mum, with Nick," Jackie says, snapping at her mother. "My love life is none of your business, so keep your nose out of my affairs, will you?" "I'm very sorry, Jackie. I didn't mean to pry or to upset you," says her mother, realising that she's touched a raw nerve, and that her daughter has obviously had some kind of altercation with her boyfriend, otherwise she wouldn't have reacted like that. She sweeps her gaze over Jackie, studying her daughter curiously. Then she rises up from her seat, folding her newspaper and walking over to the range. "I've just made some oatmeal porridge. Would you like some?" "That would be nice," says Jackie, in a subdued tone of voice, sitting down at the kitchen table. She watches her mother scooping porridge in a bowl, and bespeckling it with circles of honey and warm milk, and then she puts it down in front of her. "There you are, dear. Get that into your stomach. It'll make you feel a whole lot better." Jackie had been eating her porridge oats, while her mother continued to read the newspaper, when there'd been an unexpected knock at the front door. Her mother looks up at her daughter in surprise. "Who the hell is that? We're not expecting anyone, are we?" she says. "I better go and answer it, hadn't I?" she says, closing her paper reluctantly and tossing it onto the seat. "Be back in a jiffy, dear," she says, popping an affectionate kiss on Jackie's cheek. "Mind you eat that all up. It'll lift your mood." Jackie can hear her mother opening the door, and the trill of her mother's voice engaged in a conversation with someone. "Oh, come through," she hears her mother say. "Yes, she's eating breakfast."
For a moment, Jackie's heart almost leaps. You've got to be kidding. It's Nick coming to visit her. Please, God, no. He's the last person she wants to see. She hears her mother's feet padding towards the kitchen, followed by a pair of heavy boots. Jackie looks up from her bowl of porridge to see a police officer standing there. He'd accompanied her mother into the kitchen, and both pairs of eyes are now fixed on her. Here she is, officer. Sweetheart, her mother pipes, the officer's here. He'd like to have a word with you. What about? She asks, looking up at the officer startled. What on earth would a police officer want with the likes of her? Please sit down, officer, her mother says, removing her paper from the seat. Sit over there, please. The officer sits down at the opposite side of the breakfast table from where Jackie is sitting, while her mother brings him a glass of orange juice. Thank you, ma'am, he says, taking a sip. Freshly squeezed, just how I like it. Jackie pushes away her half-finished bowl of porridge that no longer seems appetizing. Her appetite has suddenly quite abandoned her. She can perceive by the officer's stern, solemn expression that something is up. It gives her an unsettled sense of foreboding, that something is horribly wrong. And whatever it is, it concerns her. She can feel it into her bones. The officer's brown eyes study Jackie curiously, while he brings out a white paper pad from his pocket and a pen. He looks as if he's about to take down some notes. I understand that you and Debbie Greentree are the very best of friends, and that last night you and Debbie were going to a party together. But Debbie's grandfather informs me you cancelled at the very last minute. Is that right? Do you mind telling me why that is? I wasn't feeling well, says Jackie. I had a little dispute with my boyfriend about something. She's glad to see that her mother has had the sensitivity to abandon the room, otherwise she might not have been quite so forthcoming to the officer. What kind of dispute? He asks. It's important that you tell me everything. Details are very significant. Well, if you really must know, officer, my boyfriend Nick cheated on me with the town floozy, Leticia. I'm sure you must have heard of her before. Everyone knows about her. Well, in my generation at least they do. I see. So that's the reason you didn't accompany Debbie to the party. You were upset about the breakup with your boyfriend. That's right. I was hardly going to go to a party with that self-satisfied tart hovering around me and my boyfriend, telling me it meant nothing, and looking so self-satisfied and smug. I understand, says the officer, making some notes. Jackie notices he's written down Leticia's name, with a question mark next to it. Do you know anyone who might have reason to want to hurt your friend, Debbie Greentree? Jackie gasps, cupping her hand around her mouth in astonishment. Are you kidding me, officer? Debbie's the kindest person you could ever wish to meet. She wouldn't ever harm a fly. Has something happened to her? That's what I would like to know. It would seem she has gone missing. She never returned home last night. And more bewildering than that, she never arrived at that party. Her grandfather is very concerned. She was so excited about going to that party. I gather she borrowed his car last night. Has not been seen since. She has a 10-year-old daughter, Daisy. So the grandfather is telling me that Debbie would never abandon her little girl like this. No, he's right, officer. Daisy is her entire world. She'd never abandon her child. She had that little girl at 15 years old, you know. She's 25 years old now. But she loves that child. So you can think of anywhere that she might have gone last night if she didn't turn up at the party? No, officer, I can't. It makes no sense to me at all. She was so excited, as you were saying, about going to that party. In fact, the two of us discussed it together for ages, what we were going to wear. It was a very prestigious event at a grand venue. Granted, she was sad I wasn't going with her, but I knew she wouldn't miss it for the world. Something's off, officer. She would have gone to that party last night. I know she would. By all accounts, it seemed as if Debbie Greentree had disappeared off the face of the earth, but her body was later recovered when divers discovered her car at the bottom of the lake. A fisherman who had been night fishing at the time had heard something heavy falling into the water and thought nothing of it until he heard about the missing persons report. He wondered if the strange splash he had heard could possibly have been the truck. The police ascertained that it would seem the truck had somehow somersaulted, flipping over the bridge and descending into the watery depths. Debbie Greentree had been unable to escape the confines of the aluminium carcass. She was ruthlessly swallowed by the hungry mouth of the lake, where many insidious secrets may lie buried, sometimes for many generations. It would seem that despite her very best efforts to break through the glass windows of the car under the water, it had become like an unyielding coffin that willfully refused to accommodate her desperate, frantic efforts to escape to safety. Jackie shudders as she thinks of her best friend's last moments. It's a sobering thought to think that she too might have shared that horrifying ending. She wondered if her friend had suffered much. Had she known she was going to die? Of course she had. Jackie could only hope that her last moments had been quick. One night before the funeral, Jackie had woken up in a cold sweat after dreaming about Debbie Greentree, who had appeared to her in her dream, looking directly into her face, pleading with her, "Look after Daisy. Don't forget my little Daisy. You have to help her." The funeral had been a big gathering of poker-faced people from all over town, people who had known or been connected to Debbie in some way. Everyone was dressed in black. Many of the female mourners were wearing black hats and veils, while the men were wearing smart black suits. The lugubrious mood was sombre and Plutonian. Even the grim, cheerless weather was crying the saturnine loss of this dearly beloved departed soul, as it had suddenly capriciously changed so dramatically. The drum rolls of thunder could be heard booming in the distance, and tenebrific grey clouds loomed over the horizon, threatening to spill their gloomy tears onto the mourners. The people clustered together tightly like miserable chickens in a coop and gathered around the large hollow in the ground, while the shiny walnut coffin, with its expensive wrought-iron hinges covered in a huge bouquet of white lilies, was lowered into the earthen depths. The sedate priest looked sombre and stony-faced in his long white robe, with its purple ribbon that flanked either side of his collar, and streamed down his chest in a decorative ornate strip of material, dappled with gold designs. "We therefore commit the body of Debbie Greentree to the ground, earth to earth, ashes to ashes, dust to dust, in the sure and certain hope of the resurrection to eternal life." Jackie was standing next to Debbie's grandfather and was holding little Daisy's hand. Mr. Greentree was well along in his age. He walked around on a walking stick, and Jackie noticed he was looking exceedingly frail of late, which was deeply concerning, as he was Daisy's only surviving living relative, and her natural birth father could not be traced. "You must throw a white rose into the coffin now," she whispers to little Daisy. "Your mummy is in heaven singing with the angels. You need to say goodbye." The little girl moves forward, her blue eyes brimming with tears, as she drops a single white rose on the coffin. "Goodbye, Mummy," she says. Suddenly the earth groans. The sound of thunder booms in the background. Lightning scars the sky with an audacious impertinence as yellow, jagged flashes of light flicker through the black clouds like firecrackers, and the heavens open. The rain begins to bolt down so heavily, like a fireman's obstreperous hose, determined to wipe out the flames of a fire. But instead this rain has wiped out the entire funeral. Everyone begins to scatter, like hundreds of rabbits across a warren, back to the safe confines of their burrows. Umbrellas open. People dash quickly back to their trucks, some covering their heads with their jackets, all wishing to escape the huge downpour that knows no restraint, as even the earth is mourning the loss of Debbie Greentree. Jackie's clothes are getting soaked, but she runs up to Daisy, holding her in a warm, loving embrace. "Goodbye, Daisy," she says, kissing the child on the cheek lovingly. "I'm not coming back to the house with you for any snacks. Please tell your grandpa I'm really sorry. I'm just too sad. I can't go back to listen to people talking about how lovely your mum was in life," she says, her eyes filling with tears. "It's too hard for me. Promise me you'll be a good girl for your grandpa." She then looks intently at Daisy. "I want you to promise me, Daisy, if you ever need my help, I'll be here for you no matter what. That's a promise. If you ever need anything, I'll always be here for you. Don't you ever forget that." The little girl nods. Little did Jackie know that she would one day have to honour a promise she'd made a long time ago. So there we are. That's the end of part 1. Part 2 is tomorrow night. Until next time, goodbye and good night.